Honey. It is the nectar of the gods, the symbol of purity, preservation, and life. In ancient scriptures, paradise is a land flowing with milk and honey. But in 401 BC, in the scorching heart of the Persian Empire, these ingredients weren't used for dessert. They were the fuel for a machine designed not to kill you, but to turn your own body into a living, breathing nest. History calls it Scaphism, the boats, but the soldiers who witnessed it whispered a different name, the long sleep. Most torture devices break your bones. This one breaks your biology. And it all started with a single drunken mistake at a dinner party. To understand the horror of the boats, we must first understand the fragility of a king's ego. The year is 401 BC. Two brothers, Cyrus the Younger and Artaxerxes II, are tearing Persia apart in a civil war. On the dusty plains of Cunaxa, a young soldier named Mithridates throws his spear. It's a lucky shot. It pierces the eye of Cyrus the Younger. The rebel prince falls. The war ends in a heartbeat. Mithridates is a hero. He saved the empire. But there is a problem. In Persia, only the king can kill a king. So Artaxerxes makes a deal. He tells Mithridates, "You will live like a prince. You will be showered with gold and robes. But in return, you must lie. You must tell the world I killed Cyrus, not you." Silence is a heavy burden for a proud man. Years pass. One night, at a lavish banquet, the wine flows too freely. Mithridates, drunk on vintage wine and suppressed pride, stands up. He shouts to the court, "It was my hand that threw the spear. It was my hand that killed Cyrus. The king lies." The music stops. The dancers freeze. The king sets down his goblet. He doesn't scream. He doesn't order a beheading. That would be too quick, too merciful. Mithridates didn't just commit treason. He humiliated a god on earth. The punishment needed to be slow. It needed to be organic. The king called for the royal executioners, but he didn't ask for a sword or a cross or a pit of fire. He asked for two boats, identical in size, narrow, just wide enough to hold a human torso. This is where the genius of Scaphism lies. It is not a weapon of impact. It is a weapon of containment. The victim is placed inside one boat, lying on his back, his arms, his legs, his head. They are left dangling outside the hull. Then, the second boat is lowered on top, like a wooden coffin, but not sealed. Bolted together, the two hulls create a perfect seal around the torso. You cannot move. You cannot scratch. You cannot shift your weight to relieve the cramps that will inevitably set in within hours. But isolation isn't the weapon. The weapon is the menu. They force-feed you. Not water, not bread, a rich, sickeningly sweet mixture of milk and honey. They pour it down your throat until you gag, until your stomach distends, until you are drowning in sweetness. Why? To induce diarrhea. The goal is not to nourish you. The goal is to turn the inside of that wooden box into a cesspool of your own filth. Mithridates is carried to a stagnant pond, a place where the water doesn't move, where the air is thick with humidity. They push him out. He drifts to the center, under the relentless, blazing Persian sun. He is full. He is uncomfortable. He is scared, but he is still alive. He thinks, "I can survive this. It's just sun and wood." Then comes the final touch. Before they leave him, the executioner takes a brush. He paints Mithridates' face with the remaining honey. He coats the eyelids, the nostrils, the lips, the ears. Every sensitive opening of the human body is now a beacon of sugar in a world of predators. The executioners row away. Silence falls over the pond. Mithridates tries to blink the sticky glaze from his eyes. The sun begins to cook the mixture on his skin. Then he hears it. At first, just a lone buzz.
then another. The sweet scent drifts across the water, carried by the heat. Nature is waking up, and it is hungry. Mithridates thought the humiliation was the punishment. He thought the cramps were the torture. He was wrong. The milk and honey inside his stomach are beginning to ferment. The pressure builds. The inevitable release of waste happens inside the wooden shell. He is now lying in a bath of his own excrement, and the creatures of the swamp, they can smell it. The boats were not designed to kill him. They were designed to keep him alive while he was being eaten. The sun is setting on the first day, but for Mithridates, the nightmare is just beginning, because what happens on the outside is nothing compared to what is about to happen inside. You think you know pain? You have no idea what biology is capable of. Join us in part 2 as we crack open the boat and look at the anatomy of death. It begins with a tickle, just a tiny, insignificant tickle on the eyelid. Your instinct screams at you to swat it away. Your brain sends the signal to your hand: move, strike, protect. But your hand hits the wood. You are trapped. You cannot move an inch. The fly knows you are helpless. It tastes the sugar. It signals to the others. Within minutes, the buzzing isn't just a sound anymore. It's a blanket. It covers your face. It crawls into your ears. This is the moment the psychological torture ends and the biological invasion begins. Welcome back to the nightmare. This is day 1 inside the boats. You might wonder, why doesn't he die of dehydration or heat stroke? That would be too easy. The executioners are actually doctors of cruelty. Every morning they return. They pry open his swollen jaws. They force-feed him fresh milk and honey. They check his pulse, not to save him, but to ensure the heart is strong enough to pump blood for the guests. The physics of the boat create a unique ecosystem. The wood retains the heat of the Persian sun. The liquid mixture inside, a cocktail of sugar and human waste, begins to ferment. The temperature rises. The boat becomes a humid, tropical greenhouse, an incubator, perfect for bacteria, perfect for rot, and perfect for breeding. The insects aren't just eating the honey, they are looking for a home. In medicine, there is a term, myiasis, the parasitic infestation of the body by fly larvae. Usually, this happens to corpses, but Mithridates is very much alive. The flies lay their eggs in the sweetest spots, the corners of the eyes, the nostrils, the genitals, and deep inside the ears. Thousands of microscopic eggs. The victims of Scaphism often reported hearing a scratching sound deep inside their heads. It wasn't madness, it was the sound of hatching. By day 5, the itching stops. It is replaced by pain, a sharp, burrowing pain. The eggs have hatched. The larvae, maggots, are hungry. They don't eat the honey anymore. They eat the soft tissue. They burrow into the skin to escape the sun, tunneling through the muscle, moving along the veins. Imagine feeling yourself being eaten, not from the outside, but from within. You can feel them moving in your intestines. You can feel them behind your eyes. The boat is no longer just holding a man. It is holding a hive. Mithridates is merging with the swarm. His identity is dissolving into liquid biological chaos. He tries to scream, but his throat is swollen shut. The executioners watch from the bank. They don't look away. They are taking notes, because the king wants to know, is he still awake? Yes. The horror of the boats is that the body fights to survive, even when the soul wants to leave. You would think death would come quickly, infection, shock, blood loss. But remember the milk and honey. It works. It keeps the blood sugar high. It keeps the heart beating. It forces the body to repair itself just enough to feed the parasites for another day. 5 days pass. 10 days pass. Mithridates is not dead. He has become a tourist attraction. The king invites the court to watch. to see the price of a loose tongue. But as they approach the rotting vessel on the 12th day, they notice something terrifying, something that defies logic. Mithridates lifts his head, he looks at them, and he smiles, or what's left of a smile. The body is broken, the insects have won, but the mind has gone to a place where no torture can reach, or so they thought, because on day 17, the executioners made a decision that would turn this torture into a war. They decided to open the boat.
The smell hit them before the sight did. It wasn't the smell of death. Death is cold. Death is stale. This was the smell of life gone wrong. A thick, hot stench of ammonia, sulfur, and sweet fermentation. The executioners gagged. They wrapped cloth around their faces, but they had their orders. They lifted the top boat. What lay inside was no longer Mithridates. It was a biological sculpture. The human form had dissolved. The legs were gone, or rather, they were hidden beneath a shifting, living carpet. The milk and honey had done its work. The waste had pooled, and in that pool, a civilization had risen. We call it liquefaction. When living tissue sits in a bath of bacteria and digestive enzymes, it begins to melt. The skin of his legs had sloughed off, floating in the mixture like wet parchment. The insects had eaten down to the muscle, and in some places, to the bone. But here is the miracle and the curse. They avoided the arteries. They avoided the vital organs. Why? Because parasites don't burn down their own house. They need the heat. They need the blood flow. And through it all, Mithridates was awake. Imagine the sensory overload. The pain had likely peaked days ago and burned out the nerves. Now it was just shock. He looked at his own body. He saw the swarm consuming him. And for the first time in 17 days, he tried to speak. Not to beg for mercy, but to ask for water. The survival instinct is a cruel master. When the boat opened, the light panicked the swarm. Thousands of larvae began to burrow deeper, frantically trying to hide inside the flesh to escape the sun. This sent a new wave of shock through Mithridates' system. His body began to spasm, a violent, thrashing seizure in the mud. The second skin of insects rippled like a dark ocean. Even the king, the man who ordered this, turned away. This was no longer justice. This was an abomination against nature. In ancient Persia, the body was sacred. To corrupt it like this was to poison the earth itself. But they couldn't stop. The sentence was death, and Mithridates refused to die. It happened on the evening of the 17th day. Septic shock finally overtook the sugar rush. The bacteria entered the bloodstream. The heart, which had pumped faithfully for weeks, began to stutter. The fever spiked one last time. Mithridates' eyes fixed on the red Persian sky. Did he see Cyrus? Did he see the gods? Or did he only see the flies? The breathing stopped. The machine shut down. The executioner approached, poked the body with a spear. No reaction. "He is gone," he announced. But the sound didn't stop. The buzzing continued. The man was dead, but the hive was just getting started. They buried him deep. They wanted to forget, but you cannot bury a story this dark. The ancient Greek historian Plutarch wrote it down. He made sure the world knew what Artaxerxes had done. For centuries, scholars have argued, was it real, or was it just a myth designed to make the Persians look like monsters? We want to believe it's a myth. We want to believe humans aren't capable of this engineering of pain. But here is the chilling truth. Scaphism didn't disappear in 401 BC. The concept, the idea of using nature to destroy a man, evolved. And in the archives of a forgotten war, we found a document, a variation of the boats used in the 20th century. Mithridates was just the prototype.
Join us for the final chapter as we uncover the modern legacy of the boats and the secret that history tried to hide. We think we are civilized. We think the wooden boats are a relic of a barbaric past. But look closely at this room. Sensory deprivation, forced immobilization, feeding tubes. The materials have changed. We traded wood for steel and honey for chemicals, but the philosophy remains the same: to trap a human being inside their own mind until reality dissolves. The boats didn't disappear, they just became cleaner. But while modern torture aims to break the mind using silence, Scaphism broke the mind using noise, the noise of 1,000 wings. So why did the original Scaphism vanish? Why don't we see it in the manuals of the Middle Ages? The answer is simple, and it is cynical. The truth is, Scaphism was too expensive. Think about it. 2 perfectly crafted boats, gallons of milk and honey, a dedicated team of guards and doctors watching a single man for 17 days. It was a luxury death, a boutique horror reserved only for those who insulted the king personally. For the masses, a sword is cheap, a rope is reusable. Scaphism died out not because of mercy, but because of bureaucracy. It was inefficient. But there is another theory, a controversial one. What if the boats never existed at all? Our only source is Plutarch, a Greek historian, and the Greeks hated the Persians. Was this whole story just ancient propaganda, a lie designed to make the Persians look like monsters? Here is the twist. It doesn't matter if it was real, because the fear of it was real. The story of the boats traveled across the ancient world. It kept generals in line. It silenced dissent. You didn't need to build the boats. You just needed to whisper the word, Scaphism. The human imagination filled in the details, and the imagination is always worse than reality. But if you ask me, the details are too specific. The biological mechanism, the fermentation, the insect behavior, the timing of death, it is too medically accurate to be pure fiction. Someone, somewhere, watched a man dissolve, and they took notes. Mithridates died on the 17th day. His body was returned to the earth. The insects that consumed him became food for the birds. The birds died and fed the soil. In a twisted way, Scaphism is the ultimate lesson in humility. It reminds us that we are not gods, we are not kings, we are biological vessels, temporary containers for energy, and when nature knocks on the door, it always gets in. The boats are gone, the Persian kings are dust, but the next time you hear a fly buzzing in your room, the next time you taste something sweet, remember the 17 days of Mithridates and be grateful that you can swat it away. This was the honeyed coffin, but the arsenal of history is full of darker secrets. We have only scratched the surface of human cruelty and ingenuity. Next week, we're leaving the swamps of Persia to touch an object so cursed it killed everyone who owned it. If you have the stomach for the truth, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, do not miss the next deployment, and tell me in the comments below, if you were Mithridates, would you have kept the secret, or would you have risked the boats for the truth? I am Julian. This is my arsenal. Dismissed.